Hello, scholars. Our Zoom went out yesterday while we were talking about this. This is very important. This is one of these things where the Greek and the Christian and Western civilization and the way we live today is deeply entangled. And why we believe in juries and trial by jury, and why we think that we should vote for a president and the person who should win should get the majority of the vote. This is this notion of consent of the governed, and somehow things are better if we work by consent of the governed. This is a deeply Christian idea, but it's also deeply embedded in the Greeks. And this is one of the things where we see in our classes this working together of the Greek and the Christian. And so want to look at it today. This article is crucial for it. So our big trajectory in the class is how we are seeing that Western civilization assumptions that we make today, and we often make without any foundation, are built on Christian and actually sort of religious Greek assumptions that go way back in history. And they are the foundations for it. So this is my article, Educating Bees, and it was fun to write. I encourage you to read the whole thing because I think it's sort of a fun thing, how they use bees. But our basic ideas here, let's get down here to this. First off is Faithcraft, all right? Faithcraft is it's called social epistemology, social knowledge. It's that we know things, the vast majority of the things we know are from social sources. We don't know them by mathematical methods. We don't do them in our own head. Aristotle and the whole Aristotelian tradition is always rooted in the idea that, hey, you can be a genius child mathematician who lives all by yourself somewhere, but to be a wise person, to be a social person, to be a political person, to be a person who is understanding of the world, you can't live alone. This is where you're a political animal. So how do we know history? How do we know geography? All sorts of things through Faithcraft, especially for Christians who are going to develop this big time. I mean, Paul does this in 1 Corinthians 15 and in other places, because if we don't trust the information about Jesus' resurrection that comes to us from the first eyewitnesses and then from the hearsay, secondary sources, tertiary sources, we can't believe in Christianity. Christianity rises or falls on the basis of a historical fact, not a theological fact, a historical fact. And if we don't believe the historical fact, the whole religion is bogus. So Faithcraft is sort of a foundational epistemology here. And then we get to this fun second notion. This is this humble think. And humble think is this word that comes out of the New Testament. As far as I know, it's the only place it's used as a single word, humble think, is in the New Testament. But it gets into a long-standing tradition which comes down to us as florilegia or anthology. And both of these terms, this means flower arrangement, and this means flower arrangement. And so you guys buy these anthologies of British literature and stuff like that. An anthology is a flower arrangement of British literature. And where does that image come from? It comes from this idea that the bees, the flower pickers, are going out and they're gathering in flowers, they're gathering in pollen. They put the pollen in a hive. And so you have this sort of information management image that is very important, this of the gatherer. And that's what historians are. We are gatherers. We don't do experiments and create new knowledge in that way that we talk about with experiments and stuff. We actually are gatherers of knowledge, and we put things together. And then you see one of the interesting things then for number 3 is consensus. Is somehow when we gather, we put things together. This is the roots of libraries. Every campus has a library. Cities have libraries. This is the roots where you gather people together. This is the roots of juries. This is the roots of gathering voters together. This is the roots of so much of what we just assume is normal. And of course, it's good. is to gather people together and gather ideas together. And in the gathering, you sort them, you organize them, and you say, and this is how we believe. Like with the jury in a trial, we get them all learning similar information, reaching out to the witnesses. The judge doesn't get to make the decision. We don't look to one person to make the decision. He sets rules. She sets rules of evidence and rules of innocent before proven guilty, that kind of thing. But it's the jury that makes these decisions. And when we get to the bottom of it, is we believe that juries basically do the right thing. Not always, of course, but elections elect the right person. This is the person who should be president, is the person who gets the majority of the Electoral College votes. I mean, and we have these systems of doing what the Constitution calls, consent of the governed. Okay? And that consent of the governed believes deeply inside that this is right, this is good. It's not necessarily always right and always good. It's not necessarily always true that the person who gets the most votes is the right person to win. On the other hand, is that in general, there's this large sort of vision that in general, this is the way things work. In the book of Acts, Acts 15, you have this story of Peter and Paul and James and other apostles and bishops and people gathering in Jerusalem to make some decisions about church history. And they gather, they talk, they debate, and then James writes this down, and he says that the Holy Spirit tells us. If you can find consensus between a bunch of people, you can then say, well, that's most likely the Holy Spirit leading us, okay? So, of course, there's all sorts of problems to this, but it is fundamentally a deep principle of how Christians and Greeks and politics and the church work throughout history. That's why you have 9 judges on the Supreme Court, is that the likelihood of the decision being more true is if it has a unanimous decision. Unanimous decisions carry the weight of being like, wow, this is like really got to have authority. So that's where this comes from. It's this 4-part system. First, knowledge is social. Second is we get out there and we gather it. We put it together. And then, we organize it, libraries. And then there's this consensus. We look for consensus. When do majorities come together? When does tradition point to something? That kind of thing. And then finally is that when it has consensus, there's likely to be honey being produced. There's likely to be something good coming out of it. Likely to be true. Likely to be the proper way things should go. Now, modern science, modern psychology often teaches this undermines this whole thing. There's this notion, there's all sorts of social science, psychological social science experiments in which show that individuals think better when they think for themselves and not think in groups. And then colleges and universities, it's one of the modern evil things to keep telling people that they think best by themselves. The grand tradition of goodness is that we think best in groups. We think best in gathering wise people together and letting them make decisions for us. Okay? So that's what this is. Yeah, it's conservative. I'm a conservative. So, yeah, this is the way things work. All right. Hey, take care. Think about these things. Read this article, look at those dang footnotes and enjoy them. They just wallow in good footnotes. All right, I'll see you in class. Hopefully the Zoom will work better.